Our next guest, Mr. Rocky Sickman. He is the president of Folds of Honor, but more importantly, the reason he's here today is to tell us about his experience when he was held captive in Iran as a young Marine. So, Mr. Sickman.
Thank you, Scott. Oh, there you go. By the way, I am not I am a vice president of Folds of Honor. How many of you have heard of Folds of Honor? Awesome. It's a wonderful organization that provides scholarships to families of fallen and disabled. And it's really, you're sitting there wondering, well, what's it got to do with you, Rocky? Well, as many of you know, how many Vietnam veterans do we have in the room? Because of you, my brother was Vietnam, my father was Army, I became Marine Corps. Don't take that against me. But you Vietnam veterans, you have no idea. The first 30 days, as I sat tied to a chair at the American Embassy in Iran, 1979, I thought of you Vietnam veterans that fought for a country, came home, and were spit on. My brother was spit on. Nobody rewarded you with a welcome home. And here I was, 10,000 miles away from home, in the foreign country of Tehran, Iran. I came from a small town of 50, and I was dogs and cats included. I mean, I had never known that there was a country of Iran. And I'm sitting there thinking, if nobody cared about the Vietnam veterans when they came home, who in the hell is going to care about 65 Americans held hostage in Iran? I was wrong. As some of you might know, there was a rescue operation. Your speaker that's coming up after me is one of those individuals that was very involved with coming over to rescue us. Had no idea that these individuals would risk their life. 8 of them lost their life because of me. And I can tell you, for the past 38 years, when I came home and finally found out that there had been a rescue operation, I can tell you, every morning when I wake up, I think of those 8 individuals that lost the ultimate sacrifice, their life, to try to come to bring me home. Every morning. It's my birthday today, 62 freaking years old. You know, you're old. It's one of those things that 62, and my wife goes, Rocky, it's your birthday. I said, yeah, but these individuals need to hear the story. Those guys that lost their life, they got on that freaking plane that morning. They did it because they knew it was the right thing. And for me to stay at home and just celebrate my birthday when I've done the wrong thing, because you need to hear it. Many of you in this room weren't even born 40 years ago, right? I mean, I look out and I see you, and so shame on me if I wasn't to come in from St. Louis, Missouri, and tell you the story. It's a story about me, but it's really about Folds of Honor and also those 8 individuals that lost their lives. So, Dan, if you can, let's show that video, please.
There's a term I love in life, synchronicity. I define that as chance with a purpose. And one fateful night, my life would change forever. I was flying from Chicago here to Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was United Flight 664. Finally get on this airplane, I walk through first class, and I see this kid catches me off guard because he's a corporal sitting in dress army green. And I go sit in coach, and about an hour and a half or so later, we land in Grand Rapids, Michigan. As we pull up to the gate, the captain comes over the PA and says that we have an American hero on board. And my mind immediately jumps to this kid in first class, right? I was like, what did he do? I'd just gotten back from my second tour of duty in Iraq flying the F-16. And he continues, the captain, by informing us that we are carrying the remains of Corporal Ron Buckland on this flight. And his identical twin brother, Corporal Brad Buckland, was in first class and has brought him those 7,000 miles home. Captain makes another request that everybody stay in their seats until his remains are removed from the right cargo hold. And that night I watched The Other Side of War. As I looked out on the tarmac, the Bucklands on the darkest night of their lives, The thing that really got me, though, was his 4-year-old son. Sat right below the cargo ramp as that American flag draped coffin inched down. And the finality of the sacrifice hit me. The reality is that this young boy would never play catch with his dad again, and he would never be tucked in at night. And that term freedom isn't free didn't mean anything until I witnessed that. And as the ceremony finishes itself up, I wipe away my tears, right, and I grab my backpack and I look back to the airplane, only to see that more than half the plane had gotten off. No place to go, except that blanket of freedom we'll all sleep under each and every night, courtesy of 1% of this country that suits up every day, willing to defend and pay the ultimate sacrifice for the other 99%. And that was my moment of synchronicity. I knew with every fiber of my being that God had called me on a mission.
So Folds of Honor, I want to make sure that you never forget that organization. If anything, today you remember that. And that's who I work for. I used to work for Budweiser, and you'll get the information. I was the director of military sales for Budweiser. I had the freaking best job in the world. Sold beer to the military worldwide, and for 11 years, and met Major Rooney, and so. It was one of those things. Folds of Honor is a therapy for me, ladies and gentlemen. Being held hostage for 444 days, there's no way in hell that you're not going to have post-traumatic stress. Trust me, I have it every day, but this is a drive for me, Folds of Honor. And so as we go through this talk today, it's going to be hard. I don't do this a lot, but again, I do it in memory of those 8 individuals. And so go back, again, 1976, young, 22-year-old Marine. And, it's like I said, my parents, God love them, came from a small town. You heard 50 dogs and cats included. My brothers and sisters had 4 of them. And my parents taught me 3 things: love of family, love of faith, and love of country. And little did I realize, ladies and gentlemen, those 3 things would basically help me survive for this ordeal. And I wanted to see the world, but I wanted to become a Marine security guard, a very elite duty. And I was reading the New York Times magazine, and that's what caught my attention, but I wanted to see the world. So I became an 0311, traveled the world, Korea, Japan, back and into Europe and back and into my last tour of duty. And I just met this young lady, which has now been my wonderful wife of 38 wonderful years. And I can tell you, folks, if it wasn't for my wife, Jill, I would be in a ditch somewhere. Seriously, that woman, she knew me before, and she knew me after. And she's been able to keep me on track. I mean, again, military, you all wear the same thing, right? Green every day. That's all I would have known to wear after getting out as a civilian. So she helped me immensely. She was just graduating from high school, right? They were so young. I said, hey, I got this tour of duty, MSG, can't be married for a term of 3 years. And she was just going into school as a dancer at ballet. And so I said, I want to do this. And once I'm finished, we're still together, we'll be meant to each other. So my first tour of duty, ladies and gentlemen, how many of you remember the Iran hostage crisis? Oh shit, holy cow. And again, you have to understand, being held hostage for 444 days, ladies and gentlemen. This year is 40 years ago, this November 4th. Tied to that chair, in the size of your hotel room, you went outside 7 times out of 444 days. The first 30 days, they tied your hands to the arms of a chair and your feet to the feet of the chair, and that's how you sat. Other than interrogations, and interrogations were to get you to make derogatory statements. Now, back in 1979, I can tell you, MSG never had any type of training because nothing like this had ever happened before. I can tell you now, there is that training. Many of you maybe have gone through this training. We had one individual out of the 65 hostages that basically ratted. He traded his fellow comrades for goodies and put them in solitary confinement for 444 days. So when you think that that stuff doesn't happen, I'm here to tell you it does. So November 4th, I had just gotten there October 7th, 29 days earlier. I mean, I was high on the hog, the best duty. You were paid by the State Department, paid by the Marine Corps, and here I was, my first duty post, and we had heard and a little historical piece about Iran. Do many of you remember why they were demonstrating? It was because the Shah of Iran had been the dictator of the country, had fled in January of 1979, and Ayatollah Khomeini, the Islamic Republic of Iran, had just formed in June of that year. Shah was out. It just so happened the medical attention in the United States. And we had gotten word that, be prepared, we're going to let the Shah of Iran in. Now, there have been 20,000 Americans in Iran. Anybody been to Iran? Yeah. Prior to, obviously, 79?
71 through 74.
Okay, were you at the base there?
No, flew in and out of there.
Okay, there were like 20,000 Americans. Beautiful country, ladies and gentlemen. And again, I was told that Iran, like Beirut, were like two of the paradises of the Middle East. Well, when we got there, not 20,000 people, there were 65 Americans. And so at this point in time, the Shah had been allowed in. We alerted the State Department that, hey, wait a minute, these guys are security, outside the gate. As you all know, security for American embassies are provided by the host government. So you're only as good as the host government. And some of you, many of you, maybe have heard my speech. They might tell me what our weapons were. In 1979, raise your hand. I've got a lot of money in my pocket. 1979.
Basement.
I'm sorry?
Basement. In the basement?
In the basement?
So where were they? No, you were saying, well,
What were our weapons that we had?
what type of shot?
Raise your hand. No, you can't play. You heard.
None.
Well, close to that. How about a State Department issued snub-nosed 38 special and a sawed-off shotgun to defend an American embassy? I just came back from Cairo, Egypt, U.S. Embassy. I speak to American embassies around the world, and I can tell you, these guys are not like that anymore. So many things. I mean, as you're going to hear the next speaker, SOCOM, it was created because of Operation Eagle Claw, that rescue operation. I mean, they'd never used night vision goggles before. They're coming over to rescue us. But anyway, long story short, we had told the State Department, if you come in, I mean, something bad is going to happen. One of the three things, and one of those was we would be taken hostage by the whole country. So it was November 4th, 1979. I just gotten off guard duty. I was walking to the motor pool gate, about from here to the back wall, in to get a vehicle, because you couldn't drive out. You had to have a driver, couldn't carry weapons. And so as I walked in, you could hear the demonstrations, which had been occurring for 2 weeks, every day. And the day before, the host government, the Revolutionary Guard, had came and provided protection. This morning, as I'm walking in, there's a camera right over my head pointing to the front gate, and it had recall. And I turned and looked immediately, and they're coming over the wall. The security that was supposed to be there to help us had left. There was no security whatsoever. So we were had. Ran back to the embassy. Back then I could run pretty fast, and got back, and we secured the American embassy. We secured, how many of you have seen the movie Argo? Yeah, I'll tell you a little story here later. And Scott, please tell me time-wise, because 444 days, ladies and gentlemen. It's kind of hard to put together in 1 hour, but I'll try to do it. There's so many different stories, but the movie Argo, it shows, and I met Ben Affleck, my son was in the movie, and I said, Ben, the movie, that morning of how the demonstrations occurred, how they came over the gate, so freaking real. In fact, I was at the red carpet premiere, and my left leg started to twitch, and my wife was right next to me, and she goes, are you all right? I said, it's just, it's so real. I mean, I can hear it, I can see it to this day. And I'm from here away, and in the movie you see them running forward. Well, that was me that they were running towards. Well, what happened next is they didn't get into the American Embassy, ladies and gentlemen, until 3 to 4 hours later. And we, as there was a detachment of 12 Marines, about 9 Marines made it into the embassy and held off for that period of time. And so it was, wasn't until about 3 to 4 hours later, I was at the front door. I had my old flak jacket. Those of you that remember the old heavy 50-pound flak jackets, and you're smiling. I had my shotgun, and trust me, my adrenaline as a 22-year-old kid, it was pumping. And I had the front door is where I came in. And they had now started to use a telephone pole, and they were pounding on the front steel door. And the plaster was coming from around the door, and I radioed and said, hey, I need some help, because we had the use of deadly force at this point in time. And so, 3 other Marines came, helped me. 2 were standing, 2 were kneeling, pointing right at the front door. The Chargé d'Affaires, Bruce Langdon, he just passed away this past Monday. Bruce Langdon, 96 years of age. He was at the Foreign Ministry. We had communication, telephone. He's trying to help get the thing resolved. And I can honestly tell you, folks, I believe, and again, I don't know this, but looking at what I was watching through the little glass door, there were individuals, Iranians, that thought that it was going to be a demonstration. But then there was another group that were using those others as a disguise, that they were determined they were going to get into the embassy. And the Revolutionary Guard, as you hear so much about, I truly believe that the Revolutionary Guard, in fact, I truly believe that the war on terrorism, it started November 4th, 1979, when they attacked the American Embassy, and we didn't do anything. All of a sudden, here we are. They are pounding on the front steel door in the back of the embassy. Billy hears a loud noise. They go down, he goes down to investigate the other side of the hallway. They tore the bars out of the window of the American Embassy. I can tell you, American embassies are not built any longer where you can tear bars out of an American embassy. He radios and says they've gotten in. So I tear off to my right, go down the steps, throw on my gas mask, and all that practice that they put you through, it all of a sudden starts kicking in. So it's Billy to the right, Rocky to the left, sawed-off shotgun, and about, I would say from here to the wall, all of a sudden they, around the corner, and this is about 3 to 4 hours, 3 hours into the whole ordeal, they, around the corner, Iranian men don't come. Iranian women in black chadors, they bring them. Why? Because they know that American men are not going to shoot unarmed innocent women. And our orders upstairs were stand down, don't fire, don't retaliate. Ladies and gentlemen, and my wife hates this when I say it, but I regret not ever pulling that frickin' trigger the morning of November 4th. And the Iranian men were behind them, pushing them forward, not fast, very slowly. And we get to the steps, tear gas is popped, they turn around, leave the building. We go now, clear out post 1, and go up to the very top. And this is where, again, we're stalling, waiting for the host government, which is what the protocol is supposed to be. They're supposed to come and remove all these people. And so we get to the very top. And so at the very top of the embassy, these individuals are in. These individuals have been taken trying to get to the chancery. Once the chancery doors were closed, you couldn't get in and you couldn't get out. So all of you that were trying to get there, you were captured immediately. You were tied and blindfolded. They would bring you up to the very top of the embassy, of the chancery. When up at the top, these are people that you just had breakfast with, ladies and gentlemen. November 4th, 1979. And here they are, begging for their life. I'm on the other side. I'm free. What that American flag represents, you have no idea, folks, what it means. Well, I think you do. You serving, you understand what it means. But when it's stripped from you, 1979, November 4th, our freedom, our dignity, and our pride were stripped from us for the next 444 days. At this time, they're bringing people, putting guns to their head, making them beg for their life. President Carter, at that time, we were in communication, said, give yourself up. These pictures right here are action pictures, November 4th, 1979. Ray's got pictures that he showed you. It's incredible, the pictures that they have. I'm somewhere, I can't believe you don't see my nose and my chin, but this is where you're tied. In fact, you're tied really for the next 444 days. The first 30 days, like I said, you were tied. At night, they would untie you, tie your wrists to your ankles, and that's how you slept for the first 30 days. You would sit there through interrogations, mock firing squads, and the things that they did, ladies and gentlemen, it just, all psychological stuff, I can tell you, I have all my fingers, but they played a lot of mind game stuff, which is really good, and I think many of you have gone through training where your DIs are really screwed with you, and it was pretty close to real. But when you're in a real country and they don't really like you, it's even more real. And it's something that you don't ever forget it. But you know, if any of you have gone through a difficult time in your life, right? You ever feel like eating during that difficult time? How do you eat when you're tied to a chair and you got a shotgun in the back of your back? And again, you're not allowed to speak. Your buddies are right next to you. In the corner of a chair, that one day I told you about the guy that came in and basically ratted on everybody. Sergeant Lopez was in that corner. I was in that corner. Staff Sergeant Moore was in that corner. And the guard was by the door with the lampshade off, just like what you could see in a typical hostage crisis. And that's how movies are come about, because they hear the real stories. And so as you're sitting there in that corner of the room, I can tell you folks, for 30 days, you had to put yourself in a happy place, because it was not a happy place. I mean, you could hear every day the city of Iran, you could hear the traffic through the broken window start, and it would peak. And all of a sudden it would come down, and the city would go to bed. And that, again, is when I start thinking about the Vietnam veterans, that nobody cared about them. Who in the heck is going to care about 65 people? You had to try, like I said, stay in a happy place. I remember growing up in a small town, my mother used to make pancakes, and I loved her pancakes. She made them on a little old black skillet. I can remember smelling them. I would get so far into smelling them, and I'd get into the kitchen and see her put 4 of them on a plate with a piece of butter on top, and I'd go to the maple syrup container, and I'd pry off the top, and I took a spoon, and I poured the spoon, the syrup over my pancakes, and I cut them, and I ate them, and it was so good. I mean, that's truly how far back. As a captain my senior year of football, I played every football game, every baseball game, I dated every girl. I slid right down A-Holes Hill. I ice skated. I played hockey. You name it. I relived every possible good time. It's something all of a sudden bring you back to reality. And again, day 1, day 5. That first Thanksgiving, how many of you love holidays, right? Thanksgiving? Here you are tied to a freaking chair. And you know that back home in Crockett, Missouri, your family, probably. And again, you had never gone through a situation like that, but little did I realize, how many of you are parents, right? How would you feel if one of your children were taken hostage? Think about it. One of your children are taken hostage. How do you really have this joyful, festive Thanksgiving? How do you have that festive Christmas and that festive New Year, not only one time, but 2 Thanksgivings, 2 Christmases? And they didn't know. My father was a concrete mixer driver. My mother was a secretary at a carpet store. The media lived in her yard for 444 days. They camped out. Because Nightline, how many of you that remember the hostage crisis? Nightline was created because of the hostage crisis, because everybody wanted to know. I mean, nobody cared about the Vietnam veterans, and here we are thinking we're forgotten. That first Thanksgiving, that first Christmas, truly thought we were forgotten. Like I said, this man right here, the Islamic Republic of Iran, had a chance to stop it. He didn't, and I truly believe to this day. Yellow ribbons, like I said, I got this. And you know you're really old when they put you in a museum. I'm in a museum in St. Louis, it's a Soldiers Memorial, and they got this ribbon, part of it, in the museum. But these are all things, like I said, some of the hostages, those that were weak, basically were made to, not made, they decided to make statements, derogatory statements, and those are things that code of ethics that you don't teach. And there's one of these individuals in this group right here that basically, like I said, ratted on high-ranking individuals at the American Embassy and stuck these 7 people in solitary confinement for 444 days. The Canadians arrested, had no idea, ladies and gentlemen. Again, you have to understand, November 4th, 1979, we knew that there were 65 Americans in the American Embassy. Had no idea that Ken Taylor, the Canadian Embassy ambassador, and his assistant, I played tennis against the week prior with Bruce Langdon, our charge d'affaires. I was playing tennis. I used to play a lot of tennis, used to work out a lot, and Ambassador Langdon said, "Hey, Rocky, I noticed you're a pretty good tennis player. I need a partner." I said, "Sir, I'd be honored. Who do we have to play?" Ken Taylor. A week before we were taken hostage, we played in tennis and we smoked it. Little did I realize, a week later, he would rescue 6 of our fellow colleagues, which created the movie Argo. President Carter was being pressured. Think about that. It was election time, and this situation, which I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, and the Iranians told us this for 444 days. It is not you, the American people, we hate. It's your government. But we will use you to humiliate your government. And you know what? They have done it for 40 freaking years. They've used it. They know. They sit there during these interrogations. We know that you're every 4 to 8 years. We just need to negotiate those 4 to 8 years. And then we stab that one in the back, and then another one comes. And that's what they have done for 40 years. Think about it. I mean, why were we released? Think about that, and I'll answer that at the very end. April 25th, 1980. Ladies and gentlemen, just to go to the restroom, put a piece of paper underneath the door, and then if you knock too loud, they tell you you have to wait. And you had to either shit or pee in a can in your room. If you're allowed to go, they blindfold you, even though you knew where the restroom was, down the hall to the left. They would have to blindfold you, take you down to the restroom, put you into the room, unblindfold you, let you go to the restroom, knock on the door, come back. You did not leave that room for 444 days, other than 7 times, and that was when we were transported to different locations. It was April 25th. We were all in the Chancery, the American Embassy, 23-acre compound. Chancery is the largest building. The morning of April 25th, all 52 of us, which didn't know that there were 52 of us, didn't know that there was a rescue operation. That night, you could tell that morning, mid-morning, people were running around, much different. You analyzed everything as a hostage. You analyzed smells, sounds, and you noticed that something was different. That it wasn't your typical day of captivity, and people were running around. Cars were flying around in the back of the embassy. You could hear them, and all of a sudden that night, they come into our room, and whenever that door jumped, whenever it opened, you jumped. Because they told you that if the United States ever attempted a rescue operation, they were going to shoot us before they would get to us. So when that door jumped, you jumped. They came in, handcuffed my hand to Billy to the left, handcuffed my other hand to Jerry. Jerry was the only American civilian, Jewish and a merchant. He was caught with $250,000 in cash. Morning, November 4th. That's another story. All of a sudden, we're blindfolded, handcuffed. They take us from the room that we were in, down through the basement, through the back, into one of the embassy vehicles, handcuff Billy to the left, to the vehicle, handcuff Jerry to the right, to the vehicle, handcuff blindfolded. They take a picture from the passenger side, and then put a blanket on top of us. The Iranians, at this point in time, had found the charred bodies of those 8 individuals, the 8 brave commandos that were trying to attempt to come in to rescue. And they, the Iranians, thought that they were going to come in and still attempt to rescue, so they took all the hostages and spread them all throughout the country of Iran. They drove us that night, probably about 8 o'clock that night, till the next day, about noon. You didn't get out, you didn't go to a rest area, you didn't go to the convenience store, you go to the restroom, you didn't get that little cheese stick or a bottle of water. You just sat there, and if you had to go to the restroom, you did it on yourself. It was hotter, and you know what? And the next day, I can remember, and I think all of you know, as military, you can sleep anywhere. And I had awakened, my blindfold was so wet, but we had a blanket over top of us. They took the blanket off, and I could hear birds chirping. And I'm sitting there thinking, heaven can't smell like this. I mean, it sounded so beautiful, but the smell was so bad, it stench. But the birds were so beautiful, and they took us out, blindfolded, handcuffed, Jerry from the right, Billy from the left, took us out of the vehicle, took us into this building, into a room that had a restroom, told us to get cleaned up. About 2 hours later, they came back into the room, and they gave us a sandwich that was still in a wrapper and a bottle of water, which you analyzed and said, we're not going to be here long. I mean, they weren't prepared for us. It was like food bought out in town, and they're bringing it in. Sure enough, that next morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, they came in, and they had moved us. And as we moved from that location, they said, you have been to Isfahan. I don't know if you guys have been to Isfahan, which is somewhat southwest of Tehran. Now you're going to another location. So they took us to another location, but we had no idea, ladies and gentlemen, that these individuals were lost. And it's one of those things that I didn't know this until after coming home, that there had been a rescue operation. I can tell you one time, we gave all names to our captors. Santa Claus, a little short Iranian, had bushy hair and called him Santa Claus. Santa Claus came in when we had our second destination. We had no idea where we were at. He came into the room and took a New York Times magazine and opened it. So there's 3 of us all standing there as Santa Claus comes into the room. He comes in and says, this is what your country is trying to do to you. Opens up this New York Times magazine, and it shows pictures of some of these individuals, some of the hostages, and a picture of something charred with a CH-53 in the back. And he closes it, and he walks out. So that's what you had to do for 444 frickin' days, is try to analyze what the hell is going on. I mean, what is that? What did you see? What did you see? What did you see? And we try to sit there and analyze that, you know what? There was a rescue operation. And some of the hostages got out. And you used to hear other Americans. Now you're in a building, in a location that you don't hear anybody else. It's just us 3. So now you're thinking, out of 65 people, that we're the only 3 left. Very, very low. It wasn't until probably July, August, they bring us back to Tehran. They drove us all the way back to Tehran. And I can tell you, they brought us back one night, because what happened in 1980, in the fall, 1980, anybody remember?
Rank election.
Well, but there was also a war that broke out. So we were at the second location, and we could hear explosions coming in weeks earlier, and they were getting closer and closer and closer. And all of a sudden, one night, an explosion hit, and the tiles in the ceiling kind of broke and fell, and they come running into our room, again, blindfolded, again, handcuffed. I was always the middle guy. I was handcuffed to Jerry, I think, to the left, and Billy to the right, and they run us out of the building. Here we are, and you have no idea who is it. The United States can't start a war because of us. There's no way. And so they put us into the vehicle, and we drive off, and it was probably about an hour, and they said, you've been to Shiraz. Shiraz, which is the city of roses. I don't know if you guys ever remember that place. And so you could tell that they weren't prepared to take us, because all of a sudden, another hour later, we pull into a filling station. Here you are, blindfolded, you're handcuffed, and you got a blanket over top of you, and it's middle of the morning, and all of a sudden you pull into a filling station. And here we were. The only thing we could do was hear. I now have to have hearing aids, but back then I could sit there. The vehicle stops. The driver gets out, walks around the left side of the vehicle. The other passenger, he gets out, walks into the store. Ali is in the back. We kept him as Ali. He pulls his rifle. He says, "Don't speak." And all of a sudden, you hear the driver go back, flips the lid on the gas tank, and unscrews it, gets the gas nozzle, puts the gas nozzle on. I'll never forget this. All these freaking crazy things. You hear the gas filling up in the back of this vehicle. And right next to our vehicle is an Iranian woman and a young daughter speaking in Farsi. They had no idea that 3 Americans were handcuffed, tied in the back of this freaking car. And you're just sitting there thinking, how strange this is. The other guy comes from inside the store, comes into the front, he closes the door, he says, Ali grabs something. We hadn't eaten that night, and all of a sudden, Ali said, I think Jerry was the first one, because he slobbered all over whatever it was. So he slobbered, and then they said, eat. And so I ate, and Billy had the last, and then they said, drink. So we started off again after we fueled, and it's a long drive from Shiraz to Tehran, and it's very hot, and they finally then took our blanket off of us. And so the only thing that we had on now were blindfolds. And again, like I said, blindfolds, you could see right through them. And they had blanketed all the way around the vehicle. That's why you wondered, couldn't be Polak and Hispanic, tied up in chains in the middle of the freaking desert of Iran. Nobody's ever going to believe this shit. And here I am, 39 years later, telling you this story. And we're laughing, because you gotta laugh about silly, stupid stuff. And all of a sudden, you can hear traffic periodically cross, and all of a sudden you hear a vehicle slow down, you hear him downshift, and he pulls up in front. Ali gets into our vehicle, pulls the curtain, don't to speed. And you hear this good Samaritan back up. And all of a sudden he stops, and you hear him turn off the vehicle, you hear him get out of the vehicle, hear him walking on the gravel towards our vehicle. So you hear him talking, and all of a sudden you hear a scuffle. And Ali gets out. I don't know, 4 or some hours later, whatever it was that they needed, they got off that vehicle. They put it onto our vehicle. I just remember when we left, our hood came down, and that vehicle was still sitting there with that hood up. And that guy, just as many others that through that 444 days, dead bodies left everywhere. People that would come in to look at the hostages. You know, people would just freaking open a door and they'd look in, and all of a sudden come back. And about an hour later, one of the guards say, "Did somebody just come in here?" "Oh yeah, Santa Claus came in," or the Easter Bunny just walked in. And so we crack a joke. Well, all of a sudden, you would never see this person again. So we get back. It's now August or so, or September, October, and we come back to the American Embassy. Again, you've only heard since April us 3 hostages. We get back to the American Embassy, and they put us in one of the rooms, Chancery, and there's bullet holes all over the Chancery. And we right away determined that there had been a rescue operation, and that we're the only ones left. And trust me, your morale it went down. That night, they took us and moved us into prison. So September, October, November, December, we went into prison. That night when we got to prison, we heard the other Americans. So we felt better that there were others that were still there, because we thought we were the only ones. And of course, while in prison, we would get material to read, and it was all sporting news. And so one sporting news, it was like, I think in October, we were reading that due to the death of the Shah of Iran, one sentence in the sporting news told us that the Shah was dead, and he died tomorrow, a day after my birthday, 39 years ago. And we go to this steel door, and we pound on the door, and the guard comes and says, "Gee," which means what? They said, "The Shah, he's dead." Thank you, sir. He's dead. And no, we do not believe that the Shah is dead. What are you talking about? It says it right here. And the Iranians, one of the guards, obviously, said we could not see the body, so we do not believe that the Shah is dead. So, like I said, folks, it was going downhill. It was going downhill rapidly because you had already been there for over 300 days. Now you find out that the Shah is dead. You're coming on to your second Thanksgiving. You're coming to your second Christmas. You didn't see any freaking light at the end of the tunnel. So when you would leave the room and they would blindfold you, you'd come back and throw the door open and walk out in the hallway, unblindfold the vehicle. That's why you wondered, couldn't people see us? Well, they had blanketed the inside of the vehicle and the blanket was open. All of a sudden, our vehicle, as it's driving down this road, heading back to Tehran, it all of a sudden starts having vehicle trouble. And the vehicle pulls over to the side of the road. And all three of our guards get out, and Jerry's much older. Jewish gentleman, I'd say 40s, and myself and Billy. And here we are, and you had to make fun, some laughter out of this. Jerry goes, "What a great freaking story." We're blindfolded, handcuffed to each other. He goes, "What a great story this would be if we ever freaking get out of here. You got a Jew, a Polak, and a Hispanic tied up in the middle of the freaking desert of Iran. Nobody's ever going to believe this shit." And here I am, 39 years later, telling you this story. And we're laughing because you got to laugh about it, silly, stupid stuff. And all of a sudden, you can hear traffic periodically cross, and all of a sudden you hear a vehicle slow down, hear him downshift, and he pulls up in front. Ali gets into our vehicle, pulls the curtain, going to speed. And you hear this Good Samaritan back up. And all of a sudden he stops, and hear him turn off the vehicle, hear him get out of the vehicle, hear him walking on the gravel towards our vehicle. You hear him talking, and all of a sudden you hear a scuffle. And Ali gets out. I don't know, 4 or some hours later, whatever it was that they needed, they got off that vehicle to put onto our vehicle. I just remember when we left, our hood came down, and that vehicle was still sitting there with that hood up. And that guy, just as many others that through that 444 days, dead bodies left everywhere. People that would come in to look at the hostages. You know, people would just freaking open a door and they'd look in, and all of a sudden come back. And about an hour later, one of the guards said, "Did somebody just come in here?" "Oh yeah, Santa Claus came in," or the Easter Bunny just walked in. And so we'd crack a joke. Well, all of a sudden, you would never see this person again. So we get back, it's now August or so, or September, October, and we come back to the American Embassy. Again, you've only heard since April, us 3 hostages. We get back to the American Embassy, and they put us in one of the rooms at the Chancery, and there's bullet holes all over the Chancery. And we right away determined that there had been a rescue operation, and that we're the only ones left. And trust me, your morale it went down. That night, they took us and moved us into prison. So September, October, November, December, we went into prison. That night when we got to prison, we heard the other Americans. So we felt better that there were others that were still there because we thought we were the only ones. And of course, while in prison, we would get material to read, and it was all sporting news. And so one sporting news, it was like, I think in October, we were reading that due to the death of the Shah of Iran, one sentence in the sporting news told us that the Shah was dead, and he died tomorrow, a day after my birthday, 39 years ago. And we go to this steel door, and we pound on the door, and the guard comes and says, "Gee," which means what? They said, the Shah, he's dead, thank you, sir. He's dead. And no, we do not believe that the Shah is dead. What are you talking about? It says it right here. And the Iranians, one of the guards, obviously, said we could not see the body, so we do not believe that the Shah is dead. So, like I said, folks, it was going downhill. It was going downhill rapidly because you'd already been there for over 300 days. Now you find out that the Shah is dead. You're coming on to your second Thanksgiving. You're coming to your second Christmas. You didn't see any freaking light at the end of the tunnel. So when you would leave the room and they would blindfold you, you'd come back and throw the door open and walk out in the hallway, unblindfolded. And they didn't want you to see the guards that carried the weapons. The guys that took us to the restroom never held a weapon. It was just the other people. We would walk outside and they would come with their weapon drawn, their rifle, and we would put the rifle in our mouth and just say, shoot us, freaking put us out of our misery. You get to that point that you don't care anymore. I mean, it's, like I said, it's 2 Thanksgivings, 2 Christmases, and you just didn't really care. So like I said, this is where we had asked for last rites, and the priest said, no, don't think like that. And it wasn't until January 20th, 1981. So does anybody know why the hostages were released? You can't play Scott. No, you can't either, right? Anyway, some people say that President Reagan had stated if he gets into office that he will give the Iranians 24 hours. If they're not released, he's going to do. And I think that they probably, the Iranians were somewhat concerned because they really didn't know President Reagan. But it was really, folks, $8.3 billion. That's not an M, but a B. Once you feed that animal, and that animal being the Islamic Republic of Iran, that animal keeps wanting more and more and more. And they know by taking hostages, they're going to get something back in return. We had no idea, folks, had no idea that the United States would ever have attempted a rescue operation for us individuals, and had no idea that the United States would pay a ransom for us hostages. So it was January 20th, 1981, after 444 frickin' days. The pair of pants I was wearing, I had worn for over 200 days. My left cheek was hanging completely out, an ugly looking sight. Shoes, they had taken our shoes from us in March 1980. They gave us plastic sandals, which my wife and my kids saw them the other day. They were probably 3 sizes smaller than my feet, but you still wore them. That night of January 20th, 1981, they come into our room and said it's time to go, which they always would tell us it's time to go. This time they didn't tie our hands, they blindfolded us. So I was the first one. Jerry put his arm on my shoulder, Billy put his arm on Jerry's shoulder. We walk out, and instead of taking a right out of the room, we made a left. Walked down the corridor, and all of a sudden made another right-hand turn, and the door opened, and you felt this cold, fresh air, folks. And trust me, the simple things of walking outside and just smelling and feeling the fresh air only happened 7 times out of 444 days. 7 times. That was 15 minutes maybe at a time. This night, it was snowing in Iran. And I can remember coming down the steps, and the snow was getting into my plastic sandals, and it felt wet, cold, but it felt so good. And the snow was hitting me in the face, and I can remember crunching through the snow to the vehicle that they were going to put us on. And we get to the vehicle, door opens, and they put us up there, turn us around, put us down. The vehicle starts off, and like I said, so many things that you remember, they trigger back, and I can remember that night, as the vehicle leaves, we scrape the right side of the vehicle, it jumps a curb, turns right, and drives for, I don't know, maybe about 30 minutes or so. And all of a sudden, we hear something that you would pray for, you would cry for, you would hope for another chance. And little did I realize that other hostages were put on airplanes and flown to other parts of Iran. When they moved all of us around, thank goodness they didn't do that to us, but here we were now, right behind this airplane. This airplane, you could feel the force push against the vehicle we were in, and all of a sudden, you start to unblindfold. Because they told you, unblindfold. It's not something you weren't allowed to do for 444 days, and you start to unblindfold. I didn't have glasses then. You start seeing people that you had breakfast with, November 4th, 1979. And now it's 1981, January 20th. They look bad, they smell bad, and you're in shock, you know, and you look at each other, and they start grabbing one by one, each of us, and they put us on back of the airplane. This wasn't the airplane, but there was a tail section, that you all know, being a Load Masters Association, you know all about airplanes. There was a ramp that we were walking up, and there was a guy with an Uzi, dark complected guy. I had no idea who in the heck it was. It was in Algeria. They had been there for 3 days. The United States delivered $8.3 billion in gold on January 17th. But Iran said, we will release the hostages when we want. So they waited until January 20th. By January 20th, it was the inauguration. Remember I told you, Iran said, we will use you to humiliate your government. We had no understanding any of that. We were freaking excited, but still somewhat concerned. And I can tell you, you start getting up onto that airplane, and one by one, people are coming on. You're not high-fiving, folks. You're not excited because you're still not free. They're outside the airplane. They're chanting "Death to America," and you're boarding a freaking airplane. Those two don't go good together. And so all of a sudden, they start closing the door. And you say, "Whoa, where's Scott? Where's Ray? Where's Jill? Where's Judy? Where's Debbie? Where's all the other people?" And they go, "No, you're the only ones left." And I said, "No, there's not 65 people here." And they go, "No, the others," which I was 16 or so, or 14, had been let go a year earlier. We had no idea that other people had been let go and that we were the only 52 left. And they assured us, because you did not want to leave anybody in that shithole. I mean, it was a shithole. I mean, you just couldn't leave anybody. And they assured us, they said, "No, everybody's here, everybody's accounted for." Pilot says, "We must leave very quickly." And again, plane's very quiet, other than the sound of the jets. He basically taxis down to the end of the runway, turns left again. All of a sudden he gets to the end, he stops right there, he starts accelerating, the plane's shaking, and all of a sudden it comes back down to an idle. Like I said earlier, folks, the things that they did with us, you know, the mock firing squad, the Russian roulette, the political prisoners that they would come in and just, then they role play this stuff. We're just thinking that they're screwing with us one last freaking time. But little did we realize they were waiting 20 minutes until Carter left office. 20 minutes. They turned the runway lights off and waited until 20 minutes just to humiliate, just to stab him in the back. Because really, what did Iran do to President Reagan right after he came in? Remember Beirut bomb? Killed 240 Marines. Again, that's why I regret not ever freaking pulling that trigger November 4th, 1979. I always wondered what would have happened had we been allowed to shoot. I probably wouldn't be here speaking to you right now, but at least we would have confronted them. But Iran has never been confronted for 444 days, and for over 40 years, they have never been. And so you wonder, why they run free? Well, why not? They've never been put in a penalty box for anything that they've done. But I regret not ever pulling that trigger that night. And finally, the pilot comes on and says, "The lights are on, we must leave." So we start taxiing down the runway, and again, like I said, nobody's excited. The plane freaking comes up, and I got my eyes closed, and my fingers are in the arm rest, and it pulls up. And it wasn't until it got into Turkish airspace do we realize that 2 Turkish fighters were escorting us and taking us from there to Athens, where they got new pilots, new services. Went from Athens to Algiers, and that's when in Algiers we got off that plane, and I got my first jacket, which boarded medevac planes. Anybody from Scott Air Force Base? Yeah, I love you. Yeah. I mean, and guys go, "Mr. Sickman, we're from, you know, the guy goes, Mr. Sigmund, welcome home. I said, how the hell do you know who I am? He goes, oh, we've been watching you for a whole year. I said, I'm watching this, what do you mean? And so they put us on this plane and try to show us clips and brochures to try to educate us on what was happening. So they flew us from Algiers to Wiesbaden, and obviously this is Wiesbaden, first night, and this is a couple days later where we finally got our uniforms. I know we probably got to go on it probably too much, but President Carter, right after the inauguration, he boarded Air Force One and came over and met with us. And I can tell you, 52 hostages, and we were alerting the State Department, if you allow the show in, one of 30 things, and one of those is taking hostages. And so, as a president, and it's documented that President Carter in one of those meetings asked his staff when they said, we got to allow the show in. And it is noted that he says, if I allow the show in, what are you going to do when the Iranians take our people hostage? Little did he realize 2 weeks after he said that, that's exactly what happened. So that morning, he came in to visit the 52 of us. And this is what we had, because we had no clothes. T-shirts and hospital gown bottoms. And so he walks in, there's just 52 of us, no furniture, nothing in the room. He comes through and he turns around and closes the door on the staff. And he came in by himself. And you could hear them all say, oh, President, we need to come in with you. And he goes, no, I'm doing this by myself. And he came in, so pretty ballsy for him to come in, God love him. But for 14 months, I had no idea that he had visited with each one of our families. Again, what president ever did that with any Vietnam veterans, right? I mean, here we had no idea all this stuff that had been going on. And so he came in and spoke to us. He goes, as a president, and I truly believe this, is as a president, you're given information so that you can make a decision. And you know what? His information was that we were well taken care of. So obviously somebody in the middle didn't pass on some of the most important information. So I can tell you now, American embassies around the world, two things. They have now a 50-man reactionary force, or if they hear it's really bad, they just shut the embassy down and you just leave. And then it is interesting, not too long ago, he had an interview, President Carter, and one of the reporters said, President Carter, is there anything that you would do different in your term of duty? And he said, yes. I go, what would be that? I wish I would have had one more helicopter. And so, obviously, that the rescue operation, you're going to hear more about in the next piece, that they needed another helicopter, supposedly. President Reagan coming into the White House. The only thing at this time, folks, I hadn't even seen my brothers and sisters, but maybe 5 minutes. It was a dog and pony show. I wanted to go home and eat my mom's homemade bread and her homemade noodles and all the good food that I had been dreaming and thinking about. The White House ceremony right here. This young lady right here. How many of you have seen the movie Castaway, right? He had the locket. I didn't have a locket, but I had her picture. That first 30 days, I can say, I didn't eat, hardly ever drank. My body was just freaking going through turmoil, just changes and everything. And it finally got to me that I said, you know what, I'm not gonna let these freaking people get the best of me. I'm gonna make it home. So that's what I strive for 400 days while we were locked in the room. Used to do 600 sit-ups, 300 push-ups, and just think of that. Like I said, it really gets hard. Those 8 guys would never have this. They sacrificed their life this is my beautiful family. So every day, I wake up and I make sure that, you know, I thank those 8 guys and all the others that sacrificed what they did so I could continue to live. And they would never be able to walk their daughters down the aisle as I have. You heard Major Rooney. Tuck their kids to bed at night, and I have. And so that's why I work for Folds of Honor, because of my wonderful family. I want to make sure that all of you that serve, that you're never forgotten. You're always going to be remembered. So you're out of the 52 hostages, there's now 34 of us. And passed, Charge d'Affaires Bruce Langdon. He passed away Monday at the age of 96. So some of the Marines down here, this guy right here, what a freaking basket case he is. It's Billy. He spent 400 days with me in a room. There's not a day will go by that we don't talk, because you go through a lot and you never forget it. His daughter calls me Uncle Rocky. My kids call him Uncle Billy. But you know, it's a bond that you'll have forever. My what's our time like, Scott? Good. My wife and I are at a freaking wedding, of all things, in Ohio. We're from St. Louis. And the father of the bride goes, Rocky, why don't you meet my sister? She's a casting director out in LA. My son, ever since he was 6 years old, wanted to be a movie actor. And she said, so he said, she might be able to help him. So sure enough, we meet this young lady, give her my card. 3 days later, she's out in LA, she's emailing her girlfriend, asking her, hey, what are you working on? Her girlfriend comes back and says, I'm working on a movie about the Iran hostage crisis. And she said, girl, we just met. She goes, that's interesting. I just met one of the hostages this past weekend at a wedding. She goes, really, who was that? She goes, Rocky Sickman. She goes, wait, Sickman, Rocky, was he one of the Marines? And she goes, yeah, he was. I had no idea, but there's Sergeant Sickman in this movie, of the movie Argo. Had no idea. And she goes, what's the chance of Ben meeting Rocky? He was one of the 52, and his son is an upcoming actor, possibly get him in a movie. She tells her friend this, and her friend says, well, that's a long shot. Let me see what Ben says. 2 days later, 5 days after meeting this girl, Ben Affleck comes back and says, I'd love to meet Rocky. Bring his son out, we'll put him in a movie. Shit like that doesn't happen, folks. We fly out overnight the next day. 6 days after meeting her at a wedding, my son is in a mail delivery. He's a bag piece. But his first movie, he can always say, was an Academy Award-winning movie, Argo, about his dad being held hostage, which really is about 6 people that were rescued by the Canadians. 3 of those I had breakfast with on November 4th. And 3 hours later, little do we realize our life would be turned upside down and never the same ever again. When I came home, if you remember, we were in Wiesbaden, made my first phone call home, talked to my mom and dad, and my dad goes, Rocky, Jill's here. And I said, she waited? And he goes, well, she wants to talk to you. And I'm thinking, well, shit, that doesn't sound good. And she gets on the phone, we start chit-chatting, and she goes, Rocky, you gotta make a decision. And I said, well, what's that? She goes, either me or the military, but I can't do this. And so that's where, for spouses that are in the room, I thank you for giving up your life. You know, my wife, God love her, you know, she said that and she feels bad about saying it back then, but I knew that I would always stay in contact with the military. And I was, like I said, I was director of military sales for 10 years at Budweiser, and I still speak in American embassies around the world. She just didn't want me to travel anymore, and so I joined Budweiser. And interesting, in the 40s, Budweiser made this can, right? This camouflage can, and the can was called Eagle Claw, the name of the rescue operation, right? 1980. Synchronicity, incredible. So I met Major Rooney. He made a cold call on the AB in 2007, had his flight suit on, walks into the front office of Budweiser, and anybody that came to Budweiser at this time that had a military program would always be passed to me. So it just so happened I was home, went downstairs, and I met this guy. He tells me his story, I tell him my story. and the rest is history. Budweiser's raised over $16 million. Since 2007, over 20,000 scholarships have been given out. Last year alone, 4,000, although 700 recipients, and these are recipients, the family of fallen and disabled military, so it's you guys, that these recipients that we could not fund, so we were short $3 million. So there's an opportunity. You can pass the word for anybody that's interested. You can become a wingman, going out to Folds of Honor, make a donation, but it's something, like I said, folks, I told you this freaking speech is always hard to talk about, but it's my therapeutic piece to really help be able to tell the story, and it helps me get through this. And so I'm like you. I get up, I get crazy in a day, and I tend to forget. And not too long ago, I had to catch a 6 o'clock flight, right, in the morning. You gotta wake up at freaking 3:30, 4 o'clock, you have to drive. I'm racing to a convenience store. I go in the convenience store, I get a water, breakfast bar, and a banana. I go to pay. I owe $4.44. That's how many days I spent in Iran. And you know what? It's, God gives me that sign whenever I feel like I'm having a freaking bad day. My worst day was when they stripped us nude, put us up against a wall with 3 rifles to the back of my head. I thought, at that time, 22-year-old kid, I was freaking gone. And you know what? That was my worst freaking day. For me to catch a 6 o'clock flight is like freaking nothing, as opposed to being held hostage for 444 days. And so he gives me that sign, 444, in times that I in the middle of the morning, I wake up and I can't sleep because I got all this stuff happening. All of a sudden I wake up and I see a 444. So he reminds me that, life could be much worse. So with that, Scott, everybody, Dan, Ray, it's great seeing you and everybody else. I thank you for your service and truly appreciate, and please know that Folds of Honor definitely got your back. So God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you, guys.
Rocky will answer questions for you. You've got a couple more minutes here, but actually, we'd like to introduce you to someone real quick.
Rocky, we've never met Colonel Carney. Colonel Carney.
Yep.
I know Colonel very well. Go ahead and introduce you.
No, I'm with the next guy. I have plenty of time. You have to let them finish up with you.
Well,
But,
this is one of the individuals that attempted to rescue us and had no idea that there would be a group of people willing to come over and try to free us from that, as I call shithole, which it was. But freedom is not free, and that's what I always say. So with that, I always like to give my good friends a challenge coin. So thank you so much. And I wish I was going to be here, but I got to catch a flight home. My granddaughter's got her baptismal tomorrow morning,
That's
so
important.
I got to get back to St. Louis. So
Hey,
I look
nice
forward
to
to
meet
it. Thank you, sir.
So Rocky will take questions for a couple minutes if anybody's got any questions they want to ask.
Yeah, and again, I apologize, folks. It's like I said, it's a very hard story emotionally. And now, being a parent, it's just my parents, what they had to go through. There's a picture of them on day 1, November 4th, and after 444 days, my poor parents, they changed, they aged so much, just trying to function their everyday duties, responsibilities, their own children, and then become a public spokesperson. My God, they never were taught any of this stuff. They were thrown into it. So, but questions? Seriously?
I've got a question. So
Yes, sir.
you told us at the beginning you were pretty physically fit.
Yes,
What
sir.
was your condition like, after the 444 days?
Well, like I said, after those first 30 days when we weren't really able to exercise, body, I don't know how much I lost, but I was very fit, in the Marine Corps, but doing 600 sit-ups and 300 push-ups a day, I was pretty ripped. My legs definitely had different issues, but we did try to walk back and forth in a room for over 600 times in a room because you wanted to try to stay fit and be prepared if you ever did have the opportunity to escape. And that's why I think they really locked us in a room. They didn't want us to be in the court. I didn't see any of the other hostages other than Billy, Jerry, and Alan and Dick Moorfield out of 52 hostages. All the other people, we were all locked up separately. Like I said, 7 of my fellow colleagues were put into solitary confinement. So I would say that issues throughout the time. I have a wrist injury, which is due to an Iranian fight I had in which I'm not hear the word Rocky, which is a big group. Interesting enough, these Iranians, they really knew how to play us. So, real quick story. One night they came in, and after coming back from the restroom, they pushed us into our room. They closed the door, and all of a sudden the door opened back up and goes, "We want to arm wrestle you." And so we slept on a 3-inch foam mattress for 444 days. It was carried with us everywhere. And so the guard said, "We want to arm wrestle you." And so then he leaves. And Billy and Jerry and I, we start laughing. It's like, you can't be freaking kidding me. I mean, really scrawny little guys. And I really think that the Iranians, they pull people from the most poverty-stricken area to bring in to be some of our bodyguards, so-called bodyguards. And there were so many things that you wanted to do to really try to hurt them. Folks, and please forgive me when I tell you this, but when that door would open, I would want to take their throat and pull it out of their neck. There was so many times each day, day 1, day 10, day 20, you wanted to put so much hardship on them, but you had to understand that if I did that, what's going to happen to the others? Ambassador Langdon, the morning of November 4th, our orders were to stand down. And Billy and I had 22-year-old kids with sawed-off shotguns. How and why we didn't slip and fall and accidentally shoot somebody, although, like I said, after being taken and tied to a chair, I wished so much to put hurt on them, by pulling that trigger. Anyway, the guard, he left, and so he came back about 15 minutes later, and he says, "All right, we want to arm wrestle." So, sure enough, Billy and I arm wrestled him, and we beat him. And all of a sudden, this is 1980. The Olympics, remember the Olympics? Boycotted. Iran was also boycotted. So all of a sudden he said, "Okay, now we want to wrestle you." And we're thinking, "Are you kidding me?" And so they left the room, and I said, "Billy, I've never wrestled in my life. I was baseball, football, basketball." He goes, "That's right, I wrestled. You just go in there and wear them out, and I'll put the hole on them." So we put our 3-inch foam mattresses on our floor in our room, and I got my back turned. Billy's there, Jerry's there, and the door opens, and Billy goes, "Holy shit." And I turn around, and here they had Mahmoud, which was the Olympic wrestler for Iran, supposedly, is what his name was. And it's like, holy cow, this is an Iranian on steroids. I mean, his legs were bigger, or his arms were bigger than my legs. I mean, big guy. And I'm sitting there thinking, these guys freaking set us up. And so I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh, and you want me to take him out?" And he goes, "Hey, you just wear him out. Wear him out." And so I start to take my shirt off, and all of a sudden Billy goes, "Rocky, watch out." So as I take my shirt off, I turn, he's running towards me, and I take him, and I throw him up against the wall, and I slam him down on the ground onto his shoulder. We win. Dislocated his shoulder. And at the same time, I freaking blew out my wrist. And so the Iranians, you can just imagine, we're already freaking held hostage, and we're clapping, we're celebrating, and the Iranians come in real slow, like a little cat looking for, and they pull this guy, drag him out of the room, close the door. And I mean, we're excited as all get out, but that simple little injury like that, it was a cheap shot that he was storming me with my back turned, trying to get my shirt off, so I might as well give him a cheap shot back. And so that's been documented. Billy was there, and one of the other hostages heard the story about that, and so I got a picture of that. But I mean, you just did everything in a room for 400 days. Other than the first 40-some days, you were just tied. So trust me, folks, you know, life is so much better. Toothbrush was your finger, toothpaste was your bar soap. You always wipe that soap as far down because you didn't know who was using it before. Well, after you wiped it down, and then you brushed your teeth, and then you did your bird bath. And so my kids hate hearing the stories about bird baths. But I didn't take a shower for 2-3 months. I take a shower every frickin' morning. You know why? I can. I go out frickin' side to cut the grass. I take a shower first. Why? Because I can. I mean, it's simple little things that I can get up and do things that when you're home hostage, you can't. So, anyway. Any other questions?
What was the first thing you ate when you got home?
You know what? My mother made me a fried chicken dinner with mashed potatoes and gravy and a homemade cherry pie. I think it was. Yeah. And my first beer I drank was a Busch beer. And when I came home, Coors Brewing Company gave me 444 cans of beer. Budweiser the very next day gave me 445. And then I went to work for them. So anyway, thank you again. Oh, yes.
Rocky, sorry, last question. Correct me if I'm wrong. You landed at Sergeant Galeotto from Stewart Field, New York. I think Stewart was your first location in the United States when you first got back, and then you went to West Point. What was the feeling you had when you got off the plane in Stewart? And can you tell us anything about that first couple hours you got back?
Yeah, so we had not met our family yet, and I hate to even say this, guys, but many of my fellow colleagues that were in the State Department, military, had their wife separated, because it's very hard. I mean, and I can tell you, being a Marine, the Marine Corps did something right, and that was to make sure that we were not married. Because the only thing I had to worry about when I was held was me. These other guys were, who's taking care of my wife? Who's taking care of their parents and their kids? The Iranians, and through our interrogation, they found out everything about each one of us. One of the State Department guys had a special needs son, and in interrogation, they heard about this guy, about his son, and they found out that his son was dropped off every day at the corner of 2nd and Elm or whatever it was. And the Iranians said, if you don't work with us, we will have Johnny picked up for you. And so that's how far in the frickin' head that they would get. But yeah, so coming home, got to Wiesbaden, you know, again, it's got cleaned up, and I don't know, for the next 4 or 5, I can't recall the number of days, they had, you know, tubes hooked up to us, and did our debriefing, met President Carter. We then came over and landed in Stewart, and that was an abandoned airfield. It was supposedly the only field that was that abandoned where media couldn't, you know, see. And that was the first time I got to see my mom and dad, and the other guys got to see their spouse. We then took coaches, buses, and all along you have these pictures of people handing, you know, holding up "Welcome Home, Rocky." It's like, how did it still it doesn't dawn on me how much media attention, because none of that was for the Vietnam veterans, and now here we came home, we got all this, and it was like, can't believe that this is from Stewart all the way to West Point. There were people along the road just there to wave and salute. And I truly believe that because of what happened in 1979, 1981, that our government realized that we had done wrong to our previous veterans. And what, 1983, the Vietnam Wall was built, I think it was, and all the other memorials. So because they realized. But got to West Point, and we ate with the cadets, 4,000 of them, and so just had an incredible time. I can't recall how many days, I take that back. We were there for the Super Bowl, because they played the Super Bowl on our behalf, and we came back, and I can remember that night, and I was on a high of living and just not sleeping, and we ate that night, and I came back to my room at West Point, had one of the front rooms, and I remember being on the phone with my girlfriend, which is now my wonderful wife, 38 years, and I'm talking to her, and all of a sudden I passed out. And the next thing I remember is somebody waking me because they had to break into the room because they thought something had happened. I had hit a low, and I just collapsed. And so days later, then they took us and flew us into D.C., where I met my brothers and sisters and back. But I go to Hotel there. Have you been there?
Yes, sir.
And in the lobby, there's still pictures of us when we came home. So it's wonderful memories, and I've been up there many times, and it's heartbreaking when Army beats Navy all the time. So I'm going to be going to the Army-Navy game this year, so with my son-in-laws and other people. So, but yeah, it's a wonderful time. Any other? Thank you again, guys and ladies.